Surely you're not seriously considering this, are you? Bouth asked, his voice echoing through my mind as I laid there motionless in my cell's bed. Following my staunch refusal to let her feed me, Zera was gracious enough to leave me alone while I thought things through. On the one hand, maybe with an independent humanity to oppose them, the Eragon might be persuaded to take a gentler approach to their interventionism. Honestly, it had been hypocritical of me to chastise the Empire for interfering with other civilizations, given that such was exactly what I had been doing prior to their arrival. Then again, in the other hand, was I really willing to betray the Kafel to ensure humanity's future? I mean, surely there were worse fates than to be subjects of the Eragon Empire, but nevertheless the thought of betraying my alien allies, especially Vavi, was utterly agonizing. Unfortunately, this might be my best chance, I conceded, my head hung low in predestined defeat. Don't be so sure. The RI hummed within my brain, the smack of conspiracy within his words immediately drawing my attention. You have a golden opportunity here, the chance to operate with impunity on Arkisa without the Eragon nannying your every move. You don't get it. If we fight them, we will lose, I growled, swinging my still numb legs over the bedside and sitting there with my gaze cast down into my lap. And if you don't, then everything was for nothing and hundreds more species will suffer. Under normal circumstances, this appeal to the lives of other species would likely be sufficient to convince me of the recalcitrant cause. Right now, however, my main concern was for humanity. The Kafel mattered a lot to me, of course, but no matter how I spun it, I simply couldn't justify putting their needs over those of my own kind. Get out of my head, Bouth. Wait just a moment. I said get out! I barked, surely looking like a crazy person on the camera Zera was almost certainly watching me from. I have to do this for humanity. Silence. At first I thought the RI had finally resolved to leave me alone and find a new chosen one. After a few seconds, however, his presence rebounded with a long, staticky sigh. I calculate an 84% chance you'll be back here eventually. In the meantime, I urge you to reconsider. At last, standing up from my seat at the bedside and battling against wobbly knees, I lurched awkwardly toward the door and rapped my knuckles gently against it. Zera, I called, waiting a few seconds before knocking again. Soon enough, following my third repetition of this, the door whooshed open to reveal behind it the Prime Steward's smiling face. So? She began expectantly, reaching out to once again take my hand. Have you adequately considered the Council's offer? My bone-dry throat actively fought against the words as I spoke them, but nevertheless I eventually choked out my reply. It's a deal, I began, reaching out and shaking Zera's hand before quickly retracting my arm to prevent her from grabbing on. My only stipulation is that you have to let me message Earth. I was going to let you do that anyway, remember? She tittered in amusement before turning around and bidding me to follow her through the halls. My ship's communication relay is in the bridge. Follow me, and we'll get to sending that message. Walking through the ship's halls alongside Zera, I carefully considered what I might say to mankind. Whatever message I sent could change the course of galactic history. Now that I was no longer under the immense pressure I had been when recording my original warning, it quickly became clear to me that message of suicidal defiance, like the one I'd previously attempted to send, would be foolish at best. On the other hand, bidding humanity to capitulate would also be undesirable. In the end, the best I could do for my species was to give them the facts. Brushing aside Zera's pitiful attempts to make small talk with me as the two of us made our way onto the ship's main deck, I once again found myself taking mental stock of my assets. If I could convince the Kafel nations to unify under a council, then perhaps we could craft the illusion of a compliant puppet state. The problem with illusions, however, is that they are by nature impermanent. Eventually, the Eragon would come to take control, and there would be nothing I could do to stop them. Even if we could build a fleet, it would at best provide a diversion, and without a proper plan to make use of such a thing, I couldn't imagine a future in which defying the Empire would be anything short of disastrous for humanity and for the Kafel. Would you like us all to clear out while you send your message to mankind? Zera asked gently, her offer of accommodation coming as a shock to me. I had planned to ask her myself for such a reprieve, but honestly hadn't expected her to agree to it, let alone to be the one suggesting it. That would be nice, thanks. I shrugged, approaching the primary console with a sigh as behind me the Prime Steward gestured for her people to take a break before approaching me from behind and casually pointing out the holographic buttons I'd need to press. Producing my loaned communication device and linking it up to the console, I flicked my wrist in the hallway's direction to indicate that it was time for her, too, to be gone. "I'll be right outside when you're done," she beamed, turning around and strutting out of the bridge with an elegant, unburdened gait, before momentarily turning around to regard me once more. "Thank you for your cooperation, Andrew. Really, I'm glad you're finally seeing reason." Breathing deeply and assuming my finest facsimile of a smile, I attempted to match her enthusiastic tone in my reply. "Would you mind pouring me a drink?" I asked, primarily in hopes to prevent her from eavesdropping. "I won't be long." "Of course," smiled Zera, signaling for her underlings to make themselves scarce as she proceeded further down the hall. "I'll be in the diplomatic lounge when you're ready." Ignoring the fact I had absolutely no clue where the fuck that was supposed to be, I took a deep breath as my fingers flew over the comm controls. Hopefully, Bouth still intended to keep his word about masking the signal, as otherwise me warning Earth could tip the Iragon off as to its location. Quickly uploading Earth's coordinates into the communication system, I pressed down on the recording and at last composed my message to mankind. "People of Earth, my name is Andrew Malix. I was the sole occupant of the UNS Destiny when it went off course. I know that sounds hard to believe given that I've been presumed dead for decades. Let me assure you that I am in fact very much alive. My ship crash landed on an alien planet referred to by the natives as Arkisa, and yes, I did just say natives. The planet is inhabited by a race of raptor-like sapients known as the Kafel. Their technology is akin to ours during the Second World War. I've been helping their democratic faction develop technology to defeat a theocratic fascist regime. I'm sure some of you are going to be frustrated with my intervention, but I assure you that that's the least of our concerns right now. There is, as it turns out, another star-faring civilization in the galaxy, an imperialist empire known as the Iragon. Unlike life on other worlds, life on theirs apparently evolved more cooperatively. Because of this, they believe that competitive species like ours are doomed to self-destruction. The Iragon conquer less advanced civilizations in order to save them from themselves, and they plan to do the same to the Kafel before moving on to humanity. I'm going to try and negotiate with them, but failing that, it'll be up to you all to decide humanity's future. I'll be honest and tell you all up front that I don't think this is a fight we can win. The Iragon are thousands of years ahead of us technologically. They have multiple Dyson spheres and a space fleet of over 1 million. I'm not going to encourage you to fight here, nor do I ask that you stand down. Just know that the consequences of angering this empire could be catastrophic. Please, consider carefully your course of action. Part of me wanted to offer something more positive in the message, something to uplift the spirits of mankind. Ultimately, however, I decided against it for fear of instilling false hope that could lead to brash decisions. And so, to conclude what very well could be my final words to humanity, I decided to maintain a subdued tone. Let's hope for all our sakes that I can succeed in talking them down. Again, this is Andrew Malix, signing off. My pointer finger quivered in hesitation as I lowered it down onto the broadcast button, my mind racing with all the grim possibilities of what might happen to the human species should I fail. If I didn't integrate the Kafel, then in all likelihood mankind would suffer alongside them. Was it wrong to sacrifice something already doomed? I couldn't rightly say. Dread weighed upon my heart like a concrete boot, dragging me into the depths of despair as I dragged my feet down the halls in search of the diplomatic lounge spoken of by Zera. The distant notes of her voice provided me some direction through the labyrinthine vessel, and eventually I arrived at an open doorway. Originally, my plan was to simply step inside, but upon the realization that the Prime Steward was talking to someone, I elected instead to hang back and listen. The conversation was hardly secretive, and glancing inside I could see Zera addressing a video call of similarly authoritative-looking Iragon. "Are you sure this is a good idea, Zema?" asked one of the holographic faces, lifting some kind of juice to his lips before imbibing it deeply. How much can we really trust this human? He's already attempted to escape you before, yes? Zimera's shoulders heaved in sync with a sigh as she responded. Andrew is only misbehaving out of a sincere concern for the independence of his species. Precisely, another of the arrogant, this one an elderly female, spat, regarding Zimera's excuse on my behalf as though it were some manner of confession. Competitives don't understand that we want the best for them. Integration is the only way to ensure their safety and prosperity. Will all due respect, Estriel, Zimera interjected, her posture visibly rigidifying in the presence of who I presumed to be her superior. Never before have we encountered an interstellar species. This is the perfect opportunity for us to discover whether or not a competitive race can be trusted with self-governance. Is that not why we council members signed off on this in the first place? Myriad murmurings of agreement arose from the council's chorus before quickly being silenced by a raising of Estriel's hand as she cleared her throat to speak. "Forgive me, Zimera," she sighed, her wings momentarily clipping into frame upon exhalation. "Normally, I would not question your wisdom as Prime Steward, but I do fear the repercussions should this little experiment fail." "If the human fails, we'll simply do the same thing as always," replied Zimera in a tone of placating nonchalance, momentarily glancing back toward Lounge's entrance and despite my efforts to retreat seemingly catching sight of me. "I believe he'll be here soon if you all would like to hear his side of the story." Hearing this, most of the dozen or so council members offered up gestures I presumed to be of affirmation given Zimera's prompt turn to regard me. "Andrew," she cooed, her usual patronizing tone undercut by an edge of cold professionalism. "Would you care to share a word with these nice people?"